Today, we are discussing a major development that has captured public attention for nearly 2 decades: the release of the Jeffrey Epstein case files. These files, which include extensive documentation of Epstein's activities, communications, and his connections to high-profile figures, are set to become fully public within the next 30 days. The U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi, recently announced this decision, citing the Epstein Files Transparency Act, legislation designed to ensure that these records are accessible to the public. To give a bit of context, the Epstein Files Transparency Act passed both houses of Congress with overwhelming support. In the Senate, the vote was unanimous, reflecting bipartisan agreement that public transparency was paramount. In the House of Representatives, the vote was 427-1, with only Representative Clay Higgins voting against it due to concerns about potential impacts on innocent parties. This legislation represents a rare moment of near-universal consensus in Congress, emphasizing the gravity and public interest surrounding Epstein's activities. The law is expected to be signed into effect by President Trump, which means that within a month, the public will have unprecedented access to these files, shedding light on years of mystery and speculation. The significance of this announcement cannot be understated. Epstein's criminal activities and the surrounding network of connections have been widely reported, but access to the primary case files has always been limited. With these documents becoming public, we anticipate a wave of scrutiny, media coverage, and potentially new investigations. Public discourse will likely focus on accountability, ethical considerations, and the behavior of high-profile figures linked to Epstein. This is not just about one individual's criminal acts. It is about understanding the systemic failures, social dynamics, and potential complicity of individuals in positions of power. Today, we'll walk through the key aspects of what these case files may reveal, the high-profile connections involved, and the potential social, legal, and reputational implications. Let's start with the basics, the release itself. The U.S. Attorney General has mandated that all Jeffrey Epstein case files will be made public in 30 days. These include court filings, internal investigative records, communications, and evidence submitted during both criminal and civil proceedings. The underlying legal mechanism is the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was passed to ensure that these materials are no longer kept behind closed doors. From a legislative standpoint, the passage of this act is remarkable. The Senate approved it unanimously, which is rare in modern U.S. politics. The House vote was 427-1, meaning nearly every representative agreed that the public has a right to access these files. The lone dissenting vote, Representative Clay Higgins, expressed concern that some information could potentially endanger innocent individuals who are mentioned indirectly. Despite this, Congress overwhelmingly prioritized transparency over these concerns. This is a milestone in terms of public access to sensitive legal documents. Historically, the Epstein case has been shrouded in secrecy, partly due to non-disclosure agreements, private settlements, and court protections. Many of Epstein's alleged victims were also protected from public disclosure for privacy and safety reasons. The upcoming release balances these considerations, likely with redactions to protect sensitive personal information while still providing meaningful insight into the case. The immediate impact of this release is multi-layered. First, there will be legal scrutiny. Lawyers, journalists, and advocacy groups will comb through these files for new evidence or leads. Second, there will be a reputational impact for those linked to Epstein, whether through personal, professional, or financial interactions. Finally, the files will feed public discourse, sparking debates about wealth, power, and accountability. The next 30 days are likely to be a period of intense anticipation, media coverage, and societal reflection on the broader implications of Epstein's network. One of the most significant aspects of the Epstein case files is the extensive network of high-profile figures linked to him. Over the years, investigations and media reports have suggested connections to political leaders, business magnates, and global elites. Names frequently mentioned include Prince Andrew, former President Donald Trump, former President Bill Clinton, and Bill Gates. Each of these connections has raised questions about judgment, ethics, and potential complicity. The public's interest is intense because these individuals hold positions of influence and trust. Epstein's ability to associate with such powerful figures and the nature of those interactions will be under scrutiny once the files are released. For instance, meetings, correspondence, or financial ties could provide insight into how these relationships were established and maintained. The files may confirm some previously reported interactions, reveal new ones, or clarify ambiguous circumstances. Media outlets are preparing for a surge in reporting once the files go public. Analysts predict that social media, news programs, and investigative journalism will dominate public discourse, dissecting each document for potential revelations. While the files themselves are legal and factual records, the narrative that emerges will inevitably involve speculation, interpretation, and public debate. It is also important to consider the ethical implications of these high-profile connections. Public figures are under scrutiny not only for what they did or didn't do, but for their judgment in associating with Epstein. How much did they know? Were they complicit, negligent, or completely unaware? These are questions that the public will demand answers to, and the files may provide the necessary evidence to inform those judgments. In summary, the release will shine a light on the social ecosystem surrounding Epstein. It will clarify known connections and potentially reveal previously unknown ones. Public interest is less about Epstein himself at this point. He is deceased. And more about understanding the ethical and social dimensions of his network. Among the figures most discussed in media speculation is Bill Gates. Leaked communications from 2017, which have been partially reported previously, suggest that Gates considered meetings with Epstein to discuss charitable initiatives and fundraising strategies. These communications reveal an interesting dynamic. Gates's team seemed cautious, especially because of Melinda Gates's objections. From the available information, it appears that Gates's initial interest in meeting Epstein was motivated by philanthropy, exploring potential collaborations for charitable causes. However, Melinda Gates reportedly blocked these meetings, highlighting both a personal and professional intervention that prevented potential complications. Advisors communicated nuances in tone, indicating that Epstein expressed personal regard for Gates, which further complicated interactions. Gates himself has acknowledged that these interactions represented a huge judgment mistake. While there is no evidence that Gates was involved in Epstein's criminal behavior, the optics of the meetings, the willingness to consider interactions, and the subsequent intervention by Melinda Gates have drawn significant public attention. This dynamic underscores the complex interplay of judgment, ethics, and influence when interacting with individuals like Epstein. The files may provide additional context, including email threads, meeting logs, or scheduling notes that clarify the intentions behind Gates's interactions. They may also shed light on what Gates knew at the time, how advisors managed risk, and the decision-making process leading to cancellation of planned meetings. For the public, this aspect of the case is particularly compelling because it frames the narrative around personal responsibility, influence, and reputation management. The upcoming release of these files is likely to have personal and public repercussions, particularly for figures like Gates and those around Epstein. On a personal level, the files may validate the protective role played by individuals like Melinda Gates in preventing unwanted or risky interactions. This is significant because it highlights how personal judgment, counsel, and oversight can mitigate exposure to scandal or association with criminal networks. Publicly, the files may fuel discussion about accountability and ethical conduct among influential figures. Even if there is no legal culpability, the court of public opinion can impose consequences in terms of reputation, social credibility, and business relationships. We have seen in past cases how perception can impact an individual's influence and public standing, regardless of formal guilt. Moreover, these revelations may influence broader societal conversations about power dynamics, wealth, and responsibility. Epstein was able to cultivate a network of high-profile individuals in part due to the allure of influence, access, and potential philanthropic or financial collaboration. Understanding how these networks operated and how individuals navigated them will be a critical takeaway from the files. There is also likely to be media scrutiny on the decisions made by individuals after becoming aware of Epstein's criminal behavior. Timing, intervention, and communication choices will be dissected to evaluate whether ethical responsibilities were adequately met. This can have long-term implications for how public figures are expected to manage associations with potentially harmful individuals in professional and social contexts. Finally, the broader social impact and public expectations must be addressed. The release of the Epstein case files is no longer primarily about legal proceedings. It's about social accountability, transparency, and understanding the behavior of influential figures. The public has followed this case for years, and these documents will provide a more complete picture of Epstein's network and the choices of those around him. There is widespread anticipation that the files will reveal nuanced interactions, clarify timing, and potentially expose previously undisclosed relationships. Social media and news coverage will amplify every new detail, and it is likely that public debate will focus on moral judgment, decision-making, and the responsibilities of those with power. We can expect discussions to extend beyond individuals like Gates to include broader considerations about ethics, influence, and institutional oversight. For society at large, the files reinforce the importance of transparency in cases involving systemic abuse and criminal networks. They demonstrate how wealth and influence can shield individuals, complicate investigations, and delay justice. The public scrutiny generated by the release will likely prompt reflection on how similar cases should be managed in the future, potentially leading to calls for policy reforms, improved oversight, and greater accountability. Ultimately, the Epstein files represent a turning point in how we view power, responsibility, and the intersection of wealth and morality. As they become public, we should approach them not just as documents detailing criminal activity, but as a lens through which to examine societal values, ethical decision-making, and the role of accountability in a complex, interconnected world. The next 30 days, as these files are prepared and released, will undoubtedly shape public discourse, media narratives, and historical understanding of the Epstein network for years to come.